So in this module, I want to talk about freshly milled flour and cover some points that we don't talk about as much in the milling community. It gets talked about, but not quite as much as I think it should. Milling your own wheat berries, we hear it all the time. It is better for you. It tastes better and all of these things. But today, I want to give a little bit deeper into why it is healthier for you and why it tastes better and things like that. Get a little more technical about it, because sometimes I think things like this, like milling your own flour or making sourdough, we dive into it, but it's really good to know why. Why is it so good for us? Why are we doing it? Because that kind of knowledge and awareness of why you're doing it will keep you on the track of milling your own flour. I'm also going to talk about where I'm getting my wheat berries right now. It changes. I get my wheat berries based upon price, availability, different things like that. And I'm going to talk to y'all about that today because I get that question so often. Where do you buy your wheat berries? And it changes from time to time. And I will be linking all of that in the description box. And I'm going to make changes to reflect that going forward on my videos because it changes pretty like every few months. I'll find a better price and I'll share that with you all, and I'll try to keep you all informed on where I am getting my wheat berries. So the first thing is, let's talk about why is fresh milled flour so good for you. And then after that, I want to give you a few tips, different things that I've actually learned just recently when it comes to using freshly milled flour. And then I'm going to talk about where I get my wheat berries right now. So a freshly milled flour is when you mill wheat berries in a grain mill to make flour. So up until the late 1800s, this was how people made their bread. And then they came up with these mechanical industrial sifters that sifted everything out except the endosperm, which is starch. So white flour is starch. That's all it is. And what they were left with was this white, fluffy, powdery flour that people got addicted to, because instead of brown bread, it was white and fluffy bread. And people really took to that. Prior to that, only the richest people had staff that would sift their flours to make them lighter and airier. The common people just ground. They had mills in their towns. They took their wheat berries that they grew. They had them grinded into flour and they made their bread with that. But in this process of taking everything out, they also took out the vitamins and the minerals and the fiber. And it comes to find out that after a little while, rickets came back and different diseases come back. Maybe not rickets. Don't quote me on that. I'm doing that by kind of memory. But diseases started coming back because of the lack of these vitamins and minerals, and they had to start putting them back in chemically. So they didn't really replace the germ and all of that, the bran. They chemically added back in certain vitamins to combat these diseases that people were starting to get. Okay, that in and of itself should be enough to make us say, whoa, that's not good. But let's talk about why the bran and the germ are so important for our health. So when we talk about bran and germ and endosperm, that's the three parts to a wheat berry. And the bran and the germ is where you're going to find the beneficial oils, the minerals, the vitamins, the fiber. You know, you hear bran muffins, bran flakes. That is the part of the wheat berry that is just packed with fiber. It's high in protein. It's got all 40 out of 44 nutrients that our body needs is in that little humble wheat berry. And so when you grind them and you don't sift them, you have all the parts. You have all of the nutrition. And the fun part about this that doesn't get talked about nearly enough, in my opinion, in the freshly milled flour community, it does get talked about if you're real deep into the community, but if you're brand new, maybe not. If you eat fresh milled flour, there is actually an enzyme in the flour, in that wheat berry, that helps you digest it, that helps your body naturally break down phytic acid, that helps you with the digestion process. Nobody talks about that enough. I mean, they do, and if you go to you look for it, you'll find it. But I think it needs to become common knowledge in the freshly milled community that this enzyme exists in the wheat berry that actually helps you digest it. That's why you'll hear people say, I can eat 100% freshly milled flour bread products, but I can't eat all-purpose bread products. That's me. This is the situation that I'm in. My body does not digest starch, apparently, like it should. And it really wasn't made to. It really wasn't made to digest just the one part of the wheat berry. Your body was made to digest the entire, because you need fiber, you need the vitamins, you need the minerals, you need that enzyme that is so important to digestion. So even though we talk about it's good for you, it does have a lot of vitamins and minerals, we need to get it more out there about this enzyme. You can look this up, you can do your research on it, and it's widely available online. All you need to do is go to Google and type in enzyme in fresh milled flour or wheat berries that aids digestion, and you can read up on this. I'm going to leave a couple of articles down below that talks about this, and I really think it's important because there's a lot of us out there that struggle with digesting bread products. Now for me, I can do a 24-hour long fermented loaf of all-purpose bread and I will still have bloating. I will still have indigestion. Not as bad as if I just ate white bread from the store made with yeast or here made with yeast. But the thing that is so interesting to me is if I make a yeast loaf, which is a quick fermentation, with all freshly milled flour, I have no issues digesting that. I don't bloat. I don't have the indigestion. I don't have any of the problems. This is important. Everybody that makes freshly milled flour or maybe is not interested in sourdough, and that's fine. It's still so good for you, and you'll find it so much easier on your tummies. But all the better if we use sourdough, and I want to explain that. If there are 40 out of 44 nutrients found in fresh milled flour, and the process of long fermentation using a sourdough starter makes vitamins and minerals more available for your body to process, it's a no-brainer to me anyway that we use sourdough with freshly milled flour for our bread products. I still make yeasted products. I still make quick products like muffins and pancakes. But I think that in the full context of it, if you want to say what is the healthiest loaf of bread, I would argue, and like I said, this is just my, I guess, mind going through all of the different pieces of information that I've read. The healthiest option is a long fermented loaf of sourdough bread that is all freshly milled, and preferably that your sourdough starter has been either converted to or is a freshly milled sourdough starter. And even better is ancient grains, long fermented. So I feel like I went crazy just now because this is something that I'm really passionate about right now, that we need to get this information out there, because we hear so much about how good it is for you, and it is. But I think sometimes just to go a step further and talk about this enzyme that nobody really, I don't hear about it that often, and how it aids in your digestion is a game changer, and was a game changer for my health. And I want to make sure that that information is out there. So let's talk about this process of long fermenting fresh milled flour recipes and some tips. And I have made, and I talked about this on a module a little bit earlier, I have made this recipe that we're all going to be making together at the end of this course. I have made that recipe, I can't even tell you how many times. And every week after making it 2 times that week, I'm getting more and more comfortable with it, and I'm finding little tweaks and little things I can do. So let's talk about, like, fresh milled flour. Number one, the gluten develops slower, so you have to work with it a little more. Now, this is not ancient wheat, I'll get to that in just a minute, but modern wheat. If you're using hard white, hard red, the protein's there, the gluten's there, but it takes a little more time. So if you normally need a loaf of bread for 6 to 8 minutes, you may want to jump that up to 10 to 12 minutes. I've noticed that for me. But more importantly, with sourdough, with artisan bread, we're doing the stretching and the folding. Instead of like 3 sets, I'm doing like 6, and I am getting the most beautiful loaves of bread with really nice oven spring for a 100% freshly milled loaf. And I'm finding that time that I took to get it to that really glossy and stretchy state makes all the difference. And so, number one, you need to take your time on building that gluten. But before you can build the gluten, you need to allow that freshly milled flour to absorb all the water and soften the bran and germ a bit. This is what is commonly referred to as autolysis. And I am finding the longer that I will let that go, the better the results. 30 minutes is a minimum for me. But on this loaf that I've been making lately, I've been pushing it an hour, and it already feels so much better when I go to do my first set of stretch and folds, or if I'm going to knead it. It already feels so much better. Think of bran and germ as sharp little chards, and when you're trying to knead it and you build a little bit of gluten, those chards will cut through it. And so it's harder to get the gluten to build up that way. And so I think that if you soak it for at least 30 minutes, and I get that question a lot, do I need to soak all of the flour or part of the flour? I would say at least half of the flour should be soaked. I soak all of mine, but I have heard people say that the bread actually lasts longer if you only soak part of it. I'm not sure exactly how that works. I haven't personally had that revelation in my kitchen. It seems to last about the same for me. So the way that I look at it is it's easier for me just to put the flour in there, in the water, and the sourdough starter, and the salt, mix it up, and just leave it sit for like an hour. And then I come and I start my stretch and folds. Now, once you develop the gluten, the thing I have noticed, and I have heard people who have a totally different experience with freshly milled flour. And so I think that that in of itself is something that I'm looking into. I'm trying to find out why. But for me, in my house, in my kitchen, I find that freshly milled flour, sourdough, goes quicker for me as far as fermentation than all-purpose flour. Now, I've heard a few people saying that theirs can go longer, and I'm not sure exactly what they're doing that's different from what I'm doing. But for me, it works to watch my fermentation time and do a long, cold fermentation in the refrigerator overnight before I bake my bread the next day, and I've never had it over ferment doing it that way. And so that's just me, though. I think that we all have different experiences, and you'll have to kind of figure that out when you're making your long fermented sourdough bread products with the fresh milled flour. But for me, the only way I can pull off an overnight fermentation on the counter is by kneading it really well and then letting it sit on the counter, and that gluten is strong, and the structure is strong. It'll be fine as long as it's not like really, really hot in my house. Other than that, if I'm doing stretch and folds and doing kind of a longer process of building the gluten, I find that it just, for me, it just works better if I put it in the refrigerator after it has fermented. Now, we're going to do a whole section next week on bulk fermentation. How can I tell if my sourdough has fermented properly? And we'll dive into that next week. Let's talk about, though, ancient wheat and the different, how is it healthier? I think that the consensus is that ancient wheat is a pure strain. It is pure. It is the way God intended it. It is the way, that it was all of these, thousands of years ago, or however how long, that like einkorn is the oldest that they've been able to find. They have found wheat that was still good, like I think in King Tut's tomb or something. I mean, it's amazing to me. And I think that ancient wheat is healthier by far because nothing has been changed. So we don't have GMO wheat in this country yet. And I say yet. But it has been hybridized, which, means there's been some crossing, and, like I talked about this on a recent module, so I'm not going to go really into that. But with ancient grains, nothing has been changed. And so we get to find out what it was like to make bread when they made it all these years ago in biblical times. What was the flour like? And it really is better for you. Now, I find that with me, if I make something that is not long fermented, I'm using einkorn, and I am having amazing results with einkorn. I'm loving working with it. You're going to see lots of recipes coming out on my blog. I just put one out for einkorn sourdough sandwich bread. So delicious. I've got einkorn biscuits that just came out. I've got einkorn pancakes that will be coming out, einkorn waffles, just a few different things. So keep an eye on my blog, therosehomestead.com, to find a lot of einkorn recipes that are coming out. I got like 50 pounds and I'm working through it and I'm enjoying it so much. All right, so let's talk about where I get my wheat berries, because this is getting long. Right now, at the very present time, there are 3 places that I'm getting wheat berries. My ancient grains, like einkorn, I'm getting from ancientgrains.com. Now, I'm going to leave all these in the description box. And that's where I get my einkorn from. For my hard white wheat that is in bulk, I have been ordering from Bread Bakers the last 2 times. But I also have ordered some from Palouse brand. I want to show this to you. These are glyphosate free. They're clean. I have really enjoyed Palouse. I have used them, like my very, very, very first bulk order of grains was from Palouse brand, and so I really like them. And I have worked out a discount code for you all if you want to order from them. They have all the sizes. They have 5 pounds, 15 pounds, 25 pounds. They even have 100-pound bundles. And I'm able to offer my audience a discount, which is awesome. So I'll leave that in the description box down below, and I'll put it across here, my discount. But the main thing to look for is the glyphosate. We do not want glyphosate. That's Roundup. That's not good. I do like to get organic wheat if possible. You will pay more, and so, you know, just keep that in mind. I also have for a long time ordered my garbanzo beans from Palouse brand. They do all kinds of beans and wheat. They have hard red wheat, soft white wheat, hard white wheat, and they have a red spring wheat that is really high in protein that's perfect for sourdough. So I would suggest you go check that one out. You can get a little 3-pound bag and try it and see if it works for you. But yeah, that's where I'm getting my grains right now. I was ordering from Pleasant Hill Grains, but the prices have kind of went up, and I have found some alternatives, and so that will be reflected in my description box from now on. I love Pleasant Hill Grains, the way that they package their wheat berries, and they're so clean. But as we all know, in the economy we live in, you have to go by what is the most inexpensive. And this is so... There we go. Just now looked at it, so bright. I'm sorry about that. But I just look for what's the best deal. And Palouse brand is going to be like what I will recommend for beginners, because you can buy all these little 3-pound bags and try different wheats and decide which one's best for you. And it's in Washington State. They're a huge farm, and so it's a really good company to order from. Like I said, my very first bulk order years ago was from Palouse brand, and I love them. So Bread Bakers, ancientgrains.com, and Palouse brand, and I will leave them in the description box below. All right, well, I think I'm at almost 22 minutes. I think that's long enough to talk about what I was talking about. But keep in mind that knowing why that the fresh milled flour is better for you is important, because that will help you realize why it's helping you and why you need to keep doing it, and you need to press forward and get really used to using it, because it's imperative, I think. That's what I'm going to say. It's imperative to your health, especially your digestive health, to eat freshly milled flour instead of all-purpose flour. I'm not one to say that all-purpose flour is like an enemy and you should never touch it, because that's a personal preference. And I don't like to demonize certain foods, but I will also be honest and say that all-purpose flour is just starch. It's empty. There's nothing. And fresh milled flour is packed with nutrition, flavor, fiber, that enzyme that I was talking about. And so it's something that I want to really push into going forward this year and try to get that message out. Okay, so that's all I have for you today. Now, next week, we are going to be talking about bulk fermentation. I think that is one of those things that, for me, was the hardest when it came to making sourdough bread, even with all-purpose flour. And so we're going to really dive into that, and I want to get some visuals for you so that before we ever make that loaf of bread at the end of this course, you're familiar with what you're looking for, and it may help you right now. And so we're going to spend some time talking about that. And then after that, we're going to be making our loaf of bread. I'm so excited. So next week we talk about bulk fermentation, and then the next week we are going to be making a loaf of bread. How exciting. All right, well, that is all on this module. I hope you enjoyed it. I will be doing a bonus module in the next few days about how to get superfine flour using a stone mill. I get that question so much. My stone mill only gives me gritty flour. I'm gonna show you how to work that out. All right, well, that's all that I have for you on this module. Stay tuned for a bunch of bonus modules that will be coming out in the next week or two, and look forward to making bread together soon. All right, we will see you next week, same time, same place, where we're going to be talking about bulk fermentation.